I had a question. I used my wait time effectively. Come on, team. I was curious about the recommendations. The first one, the institutions submit within 10 days of our action plans and policy changes. Couldn't recall something coming across that needing that kind of turnaround so quick.
In the course of looking at the review, it became apparent that the preconditions were not being met, not standards. I'm talking about preconditions. Our accreditation handbook says that if that is determined to be an issue, that the institution must respond within 10 days. So that is why. And then the additional number 1 on page 3 is to ensure that before they have a new set of candidates going into the fall, that the plan is in place, that they will be matched at the appropriate time, that there's a mentor, those kinds of things. So these are precondition items rather than standards. Mm-hmm.
Okay. My other question was, how many candidates do you typically serve?
This year I have 10. And Angie, you have 9? 9.
Is that typical? And the reason I'm asking is because the interview numbers, you had 5, which is small. So I was wondering about that.
No, actually, in terms of general education, we have decreased in numbers, and in special education, we are increasing. So that is not typical. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Yes, a member.
Well, I also congratulate you in showing such a united effort to take the feedback and to make your program stronger. It sounds like some of the candidates were already very happy with some of the relationships that they were developing. I guess I have a procedural question and then a comment. And so the procedural question is, with this 10-day turnaround for the preconditions, how are those reviewed? Is that something that the COA acts on? Is it the staff?
It's something that staff would act on. We look at the preconditions to determine whether on paper it's aligned, and that's why the October 15th date, that would be brought back to you to say that here's what they're actually. We could give you an update at that point where we've on paper have agreed that what they're doing is in alignment with the preconditions, and then we'll know more definitively that they put that in practice. So Gay could come back with an update at that point in time.
So I guess my question then is, did the team consider the idea of reporting back to the COA a little more often so that we could provide feedback and support because these are for some pretty widespread or leadership issues, and as you say, you've been in a transition. I think some feedback along the way from the COA might be a way to help leverage some of those changes and make sure that they can be implemented. I just wondered if you considered the idea of, or maybe you could talk a little bit about the recommendations, your process, or what.
Sure. We did a little bit of all of the soul searching, and as she said in her report, we wanted to be supportive of the district as well as very aware of the requirements from the CTC. So not to be punitive enough as supportive. Very open to extra reports, biannually, quarterly, whichever you would prefer. Keeping in mind, however, this is my personal soapbox, to do a first quarter for a school district and have it be in August is problematic because they're soon to go off to summer vacation and they're not around in August to do a report. So it becomes very burdensome for school districts to do that first quarter report. But after that, up and going, it makes sense. Maybe triannual reports would be a better idea.
Yeah, or maybe 6 months out, because the October report will be really addressing the preconditions. Correct? But in order to give some feedback and an opportunity for dialogue about the standards, the common standards and the program standards, maybe a 6 month. But in other words, so that we're not waiting for a year in order to get that report. I think
that's very much in line with what the team talked about while they were there, leaving that final decision up to the committee.
Right, Committee Member Riggs and then Alvarado.
So as I think about our role, again, I come back to, is there a program in place that is there for the candidates who are in place? And it's highly concerning to see 3 preconditions not met. And I just want us to think very carefully about what this group is about. And all of those things related to the ramifications for an agency that offers a licensure program related to their employees, their employers, or if it's IHE, they have people not there in the summer. All of these issues can have implications for the teachers who should be receiving this support. And again, I see it as a promise from the state that when we give accreditation to a program, that it means something. Otherwise, people can look at these decisions and say, well, you know, it doesn't really matter because you can go through and not have met even preconditions and still have an accredited program. And I understand the complexities of the new induction standards, but again, when I look at the comments from the team report, I see much more than just the new standards. I see leadership issues. I see things that take time to get in place. I see no appeals process if the match is not working. And I don't see a way around that easily for the district when they have basically two people, one for general ed and one for special ed. So if a candidate says, this isn't working for me, with my mentor, what happens? How can we get to assurance by the start of next year that people will have the support that an induction program is supposed to provide? The candidates should not have to wait for the agency to take, and again, it's very easy to say, well, we've got our plan, but the implementation of it takes some time. So I guess I see this as maybe needing more support than the recommendations include, maybe some required support to make sure that we can feel good about the plan for supporting those teachers who are in this program.
So I certainly echo the same concerns, and I must commend the leadership for their commitment to improving their programs to ensure that the teachers in your districts enrolled in the induction program are receiving the best in that the students they serve deserve that. Now, having said that, and just looking at the general guidance, I would certainly propose that we may want to consider accreditation recommendation with probationary stipulations, in that candidates should be notified, and also with the added condition that no new programs be allowed to be put forth by this institution until all issues are resolved.
Thank you. Member Borges?
Couldn't we make the recommended stipulations be required stipulations? The 1 through 6 listed?
That's what you would do if you adopted them. Mm-hmm. They're recommended from the team to you.
Would that require it to be probationary instead of with major stipulations?
Oh, that's a separate decision that you could make.
Okay.
All right. Going. So, do I have a motion?
So I certainly taking into consideration the feedback that's received, that there be a structured way in which we can provide support to the district, and maybe make some requirements of similarly having maybe districts in this consortium that works on induction to provide support, like a peer kind of support from other districts in the area. Regular sort of reports as it works according to the district schedule, and that it be with probationary stipulations, and also not allowing the district to propose new programs.
Okay. Gay, quick question. Is the cluster active down there? So they could do some outreach there and get some support that way.
That's correct.
Can we make that part of the stipulations? Yeah, I don't think so, not yet, but we'll need to get it back into an emotion in terminology. I didn't hear the. And then he started talking about the terms of the motion without saying that it was.
I intended it to be a motion.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So, okay, I have a second. So, can we get that read back to us?
Okay, so I think what I heard is that it is accreditation with probationary stipulations with no new programs until they have removed the stipulations or you have removed the stipulations, that the institution be required to seek some additional support, perhaps from other programs in the same cluster, and then regular reports, and I don't think that's specific enough for a motion, so I would like to have some clarification. Quarterly reports.
Well, I think because of the issue of the preconditions, it seems a little bit different. If the preconditions report is coming first, because that's obviously got to be taken care of immediately,
Right.
within 10 days,
Right.
And then we'll hear about that in October. So I don't know if we want an additional report about the other activities that have gone on prior to our meeting in October.
Okay.
I kind of think we do. So I guess I would say a quarterly report.
Right, that'll get us one in August at the August meeting.
Okay.
Okay,
Quarterly report
reports.
with the first one due in August.
Correct.
Okay.
Member Briggs?
I do think that that is necessary, especially when I think about the appeals process related to the mentor match. That needs to be in place for the start of the year. Yeah, so.
Good point. All right. Yes, Ms. Carney.
It's my understanding that when the preconditions come in and if there are issues that come forward in October, that the COA can take action at that point.
Absolutely.
Correct? I just want to
Yes.
clarify that. I don't think that that's clear.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because what we've done with quarterly reports in the past is put them all on as action so that you can take any action you want to take. If an institution does not seem to be making this sufficient progress, you can take appropriate action at that time. So for each one of those quarterly or semi-annually, whatever number of reporting you have, they will be put on as action. So you can take additional action at that time. And if you wanted to remove some stipulations at that time, you certainly could do that as well.
All right, Member Scott?
If they have to get the preconditions addressed within 10 days, is it too soon to have some type of update in June?
We certainly could bring back their plan, sir,
I would like to
on the
hear
preconditions.
in June,
Certainly.
especially if people are going to be gone for the summer, then they need to have it figured out by June, be in place for the start of the school year.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay, Superintendent? Okay, Member Forbes.
I hate to say it. Could you please read the motion again? Because there's a few things that I'm not sure I heard.
All right, let's see. So it's a motion for probationary stipulations with no new programs being approved, that the stipulations that are in the report would certainly be additional stipulations, that there would be within 10 days they would submit the preconditions, and then we would bring a report back in June on that plan for the stipulations. That the program would seek support, particularly through their district or through their cluster, other programs within their cluster. And let's see, what else am I missing? No new programs, not no new candidates.
Candidates
And candidates notified.
Go ahead.
So one thing I didn't hear there, and I'm not sure. Oh no, it's in the other ones. Never mind. I was looking for the revisit.
The revisit's on the right side. So that's what I just said is inclusive of everything on page 3 also.
Okay. I believe we have the motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Second by Member Balateo. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And we look forward to seeing you in, we'll see you next year, but we'll look forward to reading your report in June and then again in August and October. Yeah, you got some work to do. So be sure and take some time out for yourself this summer. Take a big breath, and thank you for being here.
Cheryl, Gay needs just a minute, and I'm hoping that we could maybe do item 5
okay,
just
we
for a
can
few
certainly do
minutes
that
so that she can.
Because Gay has the next.
She has the next item.
And we could certainly do the June update through Zoom, through technology, so you wouldn't have to come here.
Okay, we are going to move to item 5 with Michelle. Sorry,
8. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Late documents.
The late documents.
The late document.
Just fill it in while Gay has a moment to breathe.
Ready? Okay. Good afternoon. This item provides information on institutions who have not complied with the timelines established in the accreditation cycle. Specifically, this item covers common standards, which were due on February 28th, and the preconditions that were due on March 31st. As an update from the last COA meeting, we still have one institution who has not submitted common standards. It's Roland Unified School District. They're currently working with their consultant to identify the next steps and options for their program. Preconditions for Orange and Indigo groups were due on March 31st. As you can see from the table that's provided, there were 72 institutions. 6 of those institutions have not submitted preconditions. There were 7 late submissions, and 2 institutions have incomplete submissions. The commission staff will continue to work with these institutions to get the late documents submitted, and an update will be provided at a future meeting. That's all.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee? Member Borges?
I have a question. When the documents aren't submitted or if they're late, is there a fine imposed?
Glad you asked that. So the regulations that we talked about last year, the cost recovery regulations, are to the old system. And I think I remember telling you about the Office of Administrative Law having a lot of issues with the proposed regulations. So we are back to the drawing board right now, and we will be going through the regulation process. The commission will hear it at the June meeting, and then there's timelines that you have to meet from there. But definitely preconditions will be in the new version of the cost regs, or late documents in general. Yes.
Can I add that the commission does not impose fines, that we do charge for an extraordinary fee when there's additional work required because a document comes in late. And so we never charge a fine, though. Okay, thanks.
All right. Member Alvarado?
So we're going to discuss this later, but it might be relevant now. In terms of identifying exemplary programs, that they submit things, that be one of the criteria, that things be submitted on time, all reports, and to be eligible for that. So it becomes an incentive, right?
Although I would sometimes wonder just about the links that don't always work. I don't think that should be a criteria. Sometimes they get broken in the mail and all sorts of things happen, but good point there.
Right.
All
We
right.
debated about when there's a submission, but the links aren't working. Do we include them on here or do we not include them on here? That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there something?
I guess I would add about that is that when things come in initially on time, I know for common standards and for program review that there's this initial review that happens and that they're notified right away. And if they send it back right away, it's not something that ever makes it to this list. So every institution who had an issue with a submission is not listed here. Does that help?
Yeah, it did raise a concern for me, though, because we had one of the institutions that are on this list we approved for a program today, and so I'm wondering just a little bit about that and the focus of energy and integrity of the program.
That's probably not their graduate school. That's their, yeah.
Is there a way to discern that aside from the words graduate school being on the end? It's always going to be a little bit of a clarification issue. All right. Okay, good to know. All right. This is not an action item. Thank you, Michelle, for your report.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to item 14. We are right on time. This is the report of the accreditation team to San Diego County Office of Education. Again, Consultant Gay Roby will introduce this item. At the table is team lead Jody Schwartzfarb, thank you, and institutional representatives Chris Rising, Executive Director, Human Resources, and Jeff Warsaw, Executive Coach, Learning and Leadership Services, as well as supporting staff attending by video. Do we have the video? Does anyone need to recuse themselves? No recusals? We're checking on the video.
Which person attending by video is the right people, but yeah. You can help them out with that, right, Chris? Shive Joes? Okay.
Hello, we have you on Zoom, but you have to give us permission by unmuting your camera. So if you would go ahead and do that, we'd appreciate it, and we'll bring you up to the forefront. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Roby, will you begin, please?
Thank you very much. The site visit for the San Diego County Office of Education took place this last March, from the 20th to the 22nd. We were at the beautiful offices of San Diego County on this nice rise overlooking the bay. Am I making you all jealous? So San Diego County Office of Education sponsors 11 programs that fall into 4 different categories. They have teacher induction, added authorizations in special education, designated subjects, and administrative services credentialing programs. The team consisted of a team lead, who's beside me, 1 additional common standards reviewer, and 4 program sampling members. The team interviewed 219 people using both a face-to-face as well as electronic platform to fit that many people in the amount of time we had. The visit was conducted according to all normal accreditation protocols, and I would like to introduce the team lead, Jody Schwartz-Farb, at this time to give the actual report from the team.
Hello, I'd like to begin by thanking San Diego County Office of Ed. Prior to the visit, as the team was preparing to arrive, some questions came up, additional evidence was needed. The team in San Diego was very responsive, provided the information as was asked. During the visit, some different interview groups, numbers seemed a little bit low, so those working at the county office scheduled phone interviews and were able to get additional people for the team to interview, which helped confirm the information in the report. So thank you for that, as well as besides the county office being quite nice, our accommodations were nice, our food was taken care of, there were home-baked goods, quite nice, and appreciate them being flexible with our desires. I'd also like to thank my team. Amongst the team members, we had one person on her very first site visit and one who was only on her second, and both of them stepped up, completed their work very well. As a team, I was very pleased that everyone came together and was supportive of each other. I was also appreciative that they were willing to work with my timeline expectations both before and during the visit. So thank you to all of them, as well as a thank you to Gay Roby, who not only was supportive and gave us great guidance during the visit, but she answered all my texts and took my calls prior to the visit and after. So thank you for that. As I believe you have seen in the report, the team is suggesting accreditation for San Diego County. Through reviewing over 50 documents, and as Gay mentioned, we had 219 people in different roles interviewed, the team found that programs are working and that candidates are very well supported. Besides the variety of programs that San Diego County Office offers, the vast area in which it covers and the locations of all of its program participants is huge. As we see today with technology, with Shive with us on camera, San Diego County Office of Ed works to meet the needs of its program participants as best as possible, often using technology for participants to be a part of PD and different types of conferences. The programs work to build on candidates' experiences and expand their knowledges through a variety of PD, reflection, collaboration, and self-assessment. At this time, I'd like to go through the standards in the report. As you have read, Common Standards 2, 3, and 5 are all met. Standards 1 and 4 are met, but with slight concern. The concerns the team found were not enough to say that these were not met. As I stated, participants are supported. They are moving forward in their practice. The concern came around with some of the language in the standards. For Common Standard 1, around consistent, systematic, unit-level involvement in all programs. Pardon me, I don't remember if Gay mentioned this. Of the programs that are offered, some are in HR, some are in the Learning and Leadership Services Division. So in my brain, it's two houses working together, the two houses together then equaling the unit. In Common Standard 4, around unit support for continuous program improvement activities, systematic unit level approach to identify unit effectiveness, and practices around the unit to gather feedback from stakeholders. So as you can hear, there's a common theme. The programs themselves are very well structured. They are supported. The participants are supported. The interviews I got to sit in on with current participants and completers, I walked out thinking, oh, I need to sign up for these programs with the glowing reviews that the candidates provided. the concern is around the two houses of HR and the Learning and Leadership Services working together. When Gay and I went for the 2-month out, month and a half out visit, we were apprised of the fact that with the advent of this site visit, the two groups were starting to work together. This is great. This is something that the team would like to support for future work. All the programs have a great many strengths, and we feel not only with the common standard language, but with what we observed through documentation and interviews, that working together and having all the programs support each other and share their strengths, or if questions come up, working together to problem solve, will only take what San Diego County Office of Ed offers even further. So that is where the concern stands. Not that the programs are not working, that there is something deficient, but that the unit is working cohesively together. Through program standards, all standards were found to be met. As there are a variety of areas, if you could permit me, I'd like to take a moment just to highlight a few strengths in each. Through teacher induction, the mentoring and program support are to be commended. In special education added authorizations, the coursework is functional and applicable, and there is sufficient support amongst all stakeholder groups. These, by the way, are words that came from our interviews, not that we just sat around and said, oh, what great things can we say. Through the designated subjects programs, there's a strong customer service connection existing among stakeholder groups. There's also a strong online content with instructors committed to fast and specific feedback to meet the needs of candidates. As you may be aware, their designated subjects program serves candidates throughout the state of California. So kudos to them and all the work that they're doing to reach out in a vast area. With the administrative services credential programs, every stakeholder group commented upon how valuable the experiences in these programs either were to them if they were completers or are to them if they're in the programs now. A strong theme that came through in all of our work, both with those administering the programs and those we were interviewing, is a passion for identifying and embracing areas for growth, along with a focus on providing quality programs. Having quality programs was never a question during this visit. All involved, that was a very clear goal, and they were going to take care of things and make sure that the participants got what they needed. That's what I've got for you today.
Thank you, Jody, for your report, and your commentary certainly filled in some of the blanks in between the paragraphs. That was very helpful. Thank you. Right now, I'd like to call the institution to make a few comments. I'll remind you this is not a time to argue the findings of the report, but really just to share your thoughts on the visit and the outcomes.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank the team. It was a very professional, authentic, rigorous review by critical friends. And I would say the findings are spot on. This is an instance where the process really worked. I would say that. The story I want to tell first would be that our organization's been going through some transition. I am the third person to lead human resources in the last year and a half or so. And so that is why the unit level communication piece is not denied at this point. How's that? I will tell you the vast majority, all but 2 of the credential programs come out of HR. The teams from Learning and Leadership that Jeff is representing today and out of HR worked together for 2 years to prepare. So that really built the partnership. Since I've taken the chair, I've committed and working hard, and we've taken real steps, concrete steps, systematic steps in response to the findings that Jeff will share in a moment. But I can tell you that there's a commitment to communicate, collect data, do a systematic look at all of our programs as a unit, as a body of programs that we offer that are accredited, and to do it in an ongoing way, and in addition to do a better job of communicating at the cabinet level in our organization. So what Jeff's going to do a quick walkthrough will show some of those structures that we built. But if I were to take a giant step back, I just got to say you should know the system worked in this case.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. as Chris has mentioned, the experience of preparing for and collaborating in advance in preparation for the accreditation visit gave us an opportunity across programs to really develop and leverage the structures and opportunities that we have to coordinate at the unit level in a way that I think is still a work in progress, but we've made some significant efforts to try to be responsive to in the time since the visit as well. So what we've distributed to you here today is a folder that contains a few different items, and I won't go through the trouble of reading them to you word for word other than just to kind of summarize and give you a quick tour of what you have in front of you. On the right side of your folder is a narrative response that speaks to the way we've tried to document our efforts to be responsive to the feedback that we received, specifically around Common Standards 1 and 4. And we feel like our experience and the feedback has positioned us well to move forward with that consistent communication, collaboration, and leadership at both the program and the unit level across all of our different programs. So in response to Common Standard 1, we have established moving forward a standing meeting item, agenda item for our senior leadership team, and a series of different scheduled meetings across the programs that are providing opportunities for ongoing dialogue and for continued exploration of some of the common needs and common strengths that we have across our programs that we can use to support one another. If you look on the left side of your folder, the attachment A is a graphic depiction of the different meeting structures that we've put in place and the way that those will fall across the calendar over the course of a year, with a combination of program members meeting most regularly with monthly meetings, and then program leads meeting across programs on a quarterly schedule, and then the unit leads joining in some of those meetings, portions of those meetings at those quarterly sessions, so that there is kind of a through line of communication that runs from the programs to the unit, and then ultimately as part of that, the institution meetings at the senior leadership level as well. In terms of the Common Standard 4 feedback, we feel like there's a good relationship between our efforts to be responsive to Common Standard 1 and our Common Standard 4 response. We've developed a set of common questions that will be included in program surveys across all stakeholder groups, and that will help to support the calibration and the service that we're providing through each of these programs in the spirit of continuous improvement. The left side of your folder behind the timeline, you'll see attachment B, which includes a list of those common survey questions that are arranged by Common Standard. And attachment C is the data collection timeline, where you see how each of the different programs plans to make use of those common survey questions and the different stakeholder groups that will be included in those. So we feel like the survey questions and the opportunity to use the responses that we get to those will align nicely with the meeting timeline that we've set up, and that the efforts to be responsive to both Common Standards feedback give us a chance to do so in a complementary fashion and in a way that really builds the strength of the unit and the opportunity to leverage the strength of each program individually and the whole group collectively. So I think that the findings of the committee helped us to really be reflective about our work, and we've appreciated the chance to collaborate more closely together and look forward to continuing to do that as we move forward.
Thank you so much for also the commendation that the system actually worked for you and you're able to use it as your third point and your leverage for program growth and improvement. And also for the evidence that you're on it. You've got a plan. It's great evidence to see that you're moving forward right away, and you have some work in front of you. It's not huge, but I think it will certainly strengthen what's happening at San Diego County Office of Education. At this time, I would like to open the floor to the Committee on Accreditation members for comments and questions. Members?
I just want to say that that unit-wide view is something that so many agencies who come before us have grappled with, and it's difficult when you're in the structure that you're in to kind of pull that all together, but fiscally it's wise to have the oversight across the unit, and so I congratulate you on moving so quickly, and I love your calendar of meetings so much I may take it back to my own institution and want to copy that visual. It's so quick and easy to see what's happening in the way you've developed that. So congratulations.
Member Alvarado.
So I certainly commend San Diego County Office of Education for their sort of thoughtful response. If anything, I think this can be a model. Certainly we can suggest for others who are, taking on this spirit of continuous improvement and then taking the actionable items that can bring and saying, here, this is what we have in place. And so I'm quite impressed and want to congratulate you for your efforts.
Any other questions, comments? If not, I need a motion. This is an action item. Motion by Member Briggs. Thank you. Second by Member Forbes. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. All right. We have a time certain. Greetings. Reconvening. A couple minutes late. Item 15 is the report of the accreditation team to Santa Ana Unified School District. Consultant Gay Roby will introduce this item. Joining her by video is team lead Alita Powers, and at the table, institutional representatives Dr. Marisol Rexach, Director, and Dawn Aguila, Program Specialist. Does anyone need to recuse themselves? All right, Ms. Roby, will you begin, please?
Thank you. It's been so long. The site visit to Santa Ana Unified School District took place on April the 16th through the 18th of this year, and they housed us at the district office themselves. The Unified School District in Santa Ana sponsors a single program, a teacher induction program, but it does serve both special education and general education, and have for quite a few years, first under the auspices of Orange Unified, and then they took reins of that program themselves. The team consisted of a team lead, a common standards reviewer, and a program sampling person. There was no unusual processes or developments, no earthquakes or anything like that during the visit. And I would like to introduce you via electronics to Alita Powers, who served as our team lead.
Thank you. We'd like to let you know that the program's documentation, interviews, and results from our entire review show that all standards are met, and our recommendation is for accreditation. While we were engaging in the process of the review, we found that the Santa Ana Unified program embraced fully both the letter and the spirit of the new standards. And they have really established a highly effective program that is individualized for each participant candidate's needs. They showed throughout that they really focus on individualized support while still providing a wealth of evidence to show candidate competence and progress throughout their program. All of the stakeholders, without exception, spoke very highly of the program and the support it provides to their teachers. The examples that they provided for why they believe in the program so strongly were very authentic and powerful, as each of them shared what they had gotten out of the program, whether it was the candidates, the mentors, or district staff. The candidates gave many, many examples of how the program is individualized to their specific needs. And they indicated that they really feel that, as opposed to the old program where they had heard that the program tried to support them, but it was mired in paperwork, there's very little of that now, and that they feel that it's entirely focused on helping them be successful as teachers in their first few years. So they've also smoothly integrated the special education program so that all of their special education candidates that we interviewed indicated that they don't know how the program finds someone for their very specialized and unique needs, that it's not just that general support, they find someone who knows what it is to teach those students. They have also collaborated very strongly with the other units in their district so that they are pulling together the resources so that the teachers are hearing from one voice rather than getting called from multiple people with differing demands, but that it's coordinated through their induction program so that they can be successful without being overwhelmed. And then the mentors all highlighted that they feel that the training they get is enriching for their own practice, as well as for effectively supporting all of the candidates and really knowing what they need to do to help the new teachers be successful. The district staff spoke very highly, and they said that they believe that it is because of the induction program that the new teachers are succeeding so well, and that is aiding their retention very much, especially in these times of teacher shortages, that they feel that's an important part of their district to have the mentors working with them and to have the induction program fully functional. But what we really wanted to highlight from this program was their highly effective use of technology. They've really accessed all of the resources, and they have people entering into their electronic Canvas platform, their ILP document. They have it set up in such a way that the mentors and the program staff and their third eye mentor that gives strategic support as needed can all give comments and feedback to the students, provide resources depending on what questions they're asking. And they also then can pull and synthesize the data so that they can design professional development based on the current ILP goals of the candidates, so that it is very specifically targeted to what they're asking for. Another great feature of it is that they also pull out the mentor feedback and use that along with other data to give very specific feedback to each of their mentors and to help guide them on what their next steps are to be a more effective mentor. So with everything that we looked at, the team felt highly confident in a recommendation for accreditation for this program.
Thank you so much. I'd like to provide the institution an opportunity to respond to the report. Not that you would argue, but I'll remind you that it is not a time to argue the findings of the report, but to share your thoughts on the site visit itself.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm not going to argue anything at all, but I do want to take the moment to just really to thank the commission to really give us this opportunity to look at our program pretty deeply and thoroughly, because we have to walk the walk. We tell our teachers to examine their practice, right, to be reflective, and this was an opportunity for us to do the same. And so, as at times challenging as it was, we had the support of Gay and Alita and the rest of the team, mostly Gay and Alita initially, I would say, but to really take a look at things and scratch our heads a bit and make sure that we were doing what was right by the qualitative changes that have happened in these standards. In the process, we really did try to embrace what we believe we get from the standards, which is that what's at the center of this is support, relationships, and actually inviting people into what we think is the most noble profession, teaching. And so everything we do is with that spirit and that hope that we do invite them into our profession. All of us, Don Aguila, who's the program specialist, Roselia Rodriguez, she's the department specialist. We really work hard to do that, and we believe that we really have the best jobs in the district. It's an honor and a great opportunity to be able to set up our new teachers and invite them to our district. We're really happy that this was communicated throughout the process of the accreditation visit. I don't think that's a mistake. I think that, as well, Chris Rising said the same. There's not a surprise. And what we've got is hopefully indicative of what our program actually is. So we'll take the great comments and the accolades and appreciate that. With regards to technology, just a little note. There was a time when lots of folks were moving to technology and essentially taking fact forms and putting them on a USB drive. I never thought that that was a good use of technology. It took us a long while to make the decision. Our district was moving into a learning management system called Canvas. Teachers were being asked to do that, right, to use it in their classroom. we sat down, we talked with other folks, and they said, if you're going to change now and change using this, because you get to model how to use this in the classroom. And I think that was a great opportunity that we had to do that. And I'm glad that it was seen as valuable and actually worthwhile. So thank you so much.
So it sounds like you have your own little magic kingdom going on. Is that thank you so much for sharing that. Just a point of clarification: the teachers are using Canvas as a as a tool for teaching, or a tool for their students' grading and collecting of assignments, or both.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm going to actually have Dawn Aguila speak to that. She's the magic worker.
So for the purpose of our program, we use Canvas. We have two courses, one for our mentors and one for our teachers. And we use it as a way to provide surveys, to have them submit their ILPs, and we provide feedback on those ILPs. Our mentors provide feedback on those ILPs. So in our program, it's used to distribute and collect the data and the work from our candidates and from our mentors. But our teachers also are using that in their classrooms and creating courses for their students. So it's being used, and whenever I see something that's, hey, this is a great add-on for Canvas, I'll model it in our course, and then our teachers can take that and use it with their classrooms.
Nice. Sounds good. Thank you. All right. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to the members of the Committee of Accreditation for any comments or clarification. Member Alvarado.
So I want to congratulate the district for the wonderful work they're doing and encourage them to share this with neighboring districts that are also using, working on induction programs, in that this is something that clearly shows that you've taken it seriously and you've really committed to offering a quality program for your teachers. So thank you.
All right, this is an action item. Do I have a member Forbes? I didn't see it. Thank you.
I also wanted to congratulate you because we know that the change in standards was not insignificant, and to move a large school district, as quickly and as with high quality, the way you've done is really an accomplishment. And I'd encourage you to share that not only with the neighboring districts, but with the institutes of higher ed that work with you, so that we can learn also how to help our candidates bring meaningful transition plans to you as well, and really have that kind of connection. Yeah.
Looking forward to those transition plans. Yes, we are. Yes, Gay.
And to the sharing point, I keep nudging them and twisting their arm. There's an second annual induction conference happening in December, and I keep saying that you need to present and show Canvas and what it can do for the other induction programs around the state.
Oops, I didn't push. Okay, we have 15 minutes to our 2:30 time certain. Ms. Clark, can we get started on one of your items, which is number 18, which is the discussion of guidance provided by staff to institutions preparing for an accreditation site visit.
So I'm hoping that this item was of interest as you read it. We have never put this type of percentages in a document, and we're a little nervous about doing it now because it is so individualized for every single institution. But we really felt that you needed to have the ability to give us some input on this topic, and that it's important for institutions to understand. I had an institution who said to me, well, as long as we have 10 people from that constituency, we're fine, right? And I said, well, how big is the program? Because it's not the same for everyone. So we have a good amount at the beginning as we try to caveat this and to say, it really, really depends on the local institution and how their programs are delivered. We always sit down and talk through all of this with the institution before we get going. And what we have in here is what we would consider the initial guidance for setting up the schedule. That doesn't mean this is the number of people that are interviewed in the end, because if there are outliers or things that are coming in, they're just very, very different, we clearly have to have more interviews at times. And the other thing is, if you got a report where there are 3 people under the percentage that's in this table, we don't want you to think they didn't do an adequate job. There are times when the institution has set up interviews. They've interviewed Sunday night, Monday, they've interviewed Tuesday morning, and they've talked to so many people, and universally the information has been consistent. Sometimes the team ends up saying, we don't need to talk to more of your completers because we've heard that firmly. So this is really a discussion item for you. We want your feedback to say, the guidance that we've tried to describe to you in here is the guidance we talk about one-on-one with our institutions. And so we're really kind of looking for your feedback. Does this guidance make sense to you? Many of you have prepared for site visits and or served on teams, and you all get the reports. So that's kind of the purpose of this item. Before it was brought in front of you, every accreditation consultant had the opportunity to read it and think about it with us and talk to us about it, because we really wanted to make sure that this is kind of what we've been saying. Cheryl, what else would you add as far as we set this up for the conversation?
Well, I think it sort of came to light at the end of the last meeting where there was some differences in numbers of people interviewed for completers. It wasn't really clear why one of the reports had fewer completers. That one of the reasons was because the survey was pretty full. Yeah, exactly. And so we wanted to bring it back because it sounded like there were still some questions on this topic in terms of equity from one program to another, in terms of making sure that we're being consistent and giving the same message and the expectations are the same. So this is our first foray into percentages. And Terry's right. We're a little uncomfortable with these putting any percentages in a table, because then they become the rule, and that's not always what we're going for. So
I think one of the things that came out in staff discussion, that maybe it's a nuance, but I think it's an important one, and Terry said one-on-one. This isn't something that we're going to suggest we change the handbook. This is guidance for accreditation staff to guide institutions. So it's about what you're comfortable with consultants talking to institutions about. We felt after internal discussion that putting a box on something that's published like and passed out could give the impression that this is a hard, fast number as opposed to guidance. And so when Terry said one-on-one, I just wanted to highlight that, because that's where we see it living, is in conversation between consultants and institutions. Whatever you decide is the right number.
Right. So I guess our question to you would be, are there any claims or any explanations in this item that don't make sense to you, or that you think we should think about in a different way as staff as we support the institutions moving forward?
Okay, Member Riggs and then Member Forbes.
I was thrilled to see the table with a range of percentages, because, boy, this goes back decades for myself, back to Phil Fitch, actually. So it is a ways back. I'm getting up there. And I think that there are issues with the interviews, and this will be a step in the right direction related to the interviews. And in order to take this process seriously, I feel like institutions have to bring forward people to be interviewed, and enough people to be interviewed. And actually, when there's a lot of different programs, I actually wonder if the interview table should say how many for each program, or maybe it does in the program report. I can't remember. But it can look good for the institution in general but you might have some programs that really were limited in how many people were interviewed. So I'm really happy with it. The last meeting we had, I left, I was like, when we had a program that had 0 completers interviewed, and then the response was, well, this is our streamlining based upon the completer data. And I was like, oh yeah, oh cool, this is great. And since then, I've had just this mulling over in my mind, because when candidates complete the completer survey, it's wonderful, and we're using it. I'm using it specifically for the courses I teach. It's just great. But after being out in the field a year, they may have a different perception of their preparation. And so for us to rely only on the completer data and say that we don't have to interview any completers, I think we need to have discussion about that as to whether or not that's wise, because it just could be completely different. It's like, I'm done, I'm out of here, I'm happy with my preparation, but how is it after a year or 2 years?
Well, I was actually going to say much the same thing. And in fact, at our last UC Education Deans and Directors meeting a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the program completer data across our system. It was really helpful to us, by the way, as a system, to kind of look at variations and questions, as well as variations across our groups, that we can communicate about. But I have we had the same wondering about the difference between what a candidate says at the moment they're getting ready to press the button, while, by the way, they're hoping to get their credential filed, and, just the sort of recency effect of maybe they had a wonderful last student teaching placement, or, the validity in general of self-reported data at that point in time. And so I also agree, we really need some kind of information from a year out, not only from the candidate, but hopefully from the employer. And so or the completer and the employer. So I've kind of lost track of, in the plans for strengthening the data collection and surveys, is there any plans still yet to try to capture the employer data through this system?
There is. The challenge with the employer data is we don't have a very good way to get a good response rate. So our employer survey, there were very limited number of institutions that got institution-specific reports. They only got statewide. So we need to continue working on that, and this fall we'll come up with another one, and we'll see what we can get.
And likewise with the completers, because sometimes it's hard for us to find them. As you know, in the UCs, we're working right now on a research project to help strengthen that database, but.
And we're trying to work and get that ready to go also to help in that project. So, yes.
All right. Any other comments on this topic? Yep.
I must say. So the commission gave us direction to go strengthen and streamline. And it sounds like we need a little bit more on the strengthening part and less on the streamlining, is what I'm hearing from the COA. So part of one of the reasons why we instituted the program completer survey was, in fact, to not have to interview graduates. So I'm trying to figure out where we get the streamlining in if now we're doing both. And am I misinterpreting what you're saying as what we're doing going forward? So I'm trying to figure out where that sweet spot is between the strengthening and streamlining.
It seems to me that what we put in the table was what we were thinking about for completers, independent of the surveys.
Okay.
So I think what we could think about here is that with positive surveys, maybe there's something like half that number.
Okay.
But that there still needs to be some completers, is what I'm hearing you talk about. But that we would be able to tell staff that this is the percentage for completers if we're looking fully at interviewing completers. If your survey data is strong, robust, and positive, you could look at half of those percentages to mean you have to bring in fewer people.
Okay.
Is that kind of what you're thinking?
I also think, Terry, that we haven't said clearly enough that these are along with guidance, it's minimum guidance.
Yeah.
So the part of the reason also why this is guidance for discussion between a consultant and a site visit is we don't want, and as we look back over the whole year of site visits, there would have been some institutions who would have said, it says right here 30%.
Right.
I'm not giving you 31% because it says 30%. So the fact that these are minimums, hopefully that also helps with your confidence.
So I thank you for that clarification. I think putting that out there a little more clearly, even just in the above the table.
But we're not publishing the table, so.
Well,
yeah.
it's part of our agenda.
Yes.
So
Oh, yeah.
it is published.
Oh, good point.
Yeah. So maybe putting this on the agenda again in a different format with that clarification might be beneficial. Just for our third point of reference as we move forward with the folks that will say, well, it says right here. Mm-hmm. All right, so Member Forbes and then Member Briggs.
Well, I was just going to say that that would, I think, resolve my concern about it. Would be it's a range, and so you'd be at the lower end of the range if your other data looked really positive, and it would be then just confirming, that those things were in fact true. But if there's other blanks or indicators that are missing, then it would seem more important to make sure that the upper range of those of completers were interviewed.
I also think that the completers data waives the need for people who have completed and have not yet been in the field with a job, not employed. So you wouldn't have to, if you've got a high percentage of completer data and it's all great, you don't have to interview any of those kinds of people. The institution would just try to bring in people who've been employed. And then the other thing is if you find that an institution does have data on people who've been employed, then you would not have to interview any completers because they've got both kinds of data. So there's still some streamlining potential.
Very, very helpful, I think.
Would you, in your experience, have you seen a lot of data from institutions with regards to completer feedback?
So, we have the CSU survey that is a year out. So there is that, and a lot of privates used to use it. I don't know what the number is anymore. But yeah, certainly. The other issue that I think has come up over the time is you mentioned per program and whether maybe you get a good, and I don't want it to become this, tallying sheet of, because we do that anyways, but I don't want, I think it would be distracting. But I think maybe if we make sure that in our reports, if there is a lack of interviewees from a particular program, that you guys are aware of that, like they had trouble getting ed specialists, mild moderate people or something, so that's called out somehow in the report, maybe.
We did hear that today, where somebody said there weren't enough, and the institution called more. So I'm comfortable with just trusting that the team and the consultant make sure that there's an adequate number for every program.
Okay, yes, co-chair Shelley.
Maybe it's just me the way I'm looking at it. I really like the table. But looking at the percentages, if we're saying that there is a minimum, for example, looking at the employers and 250 plus possible, there's a significant difference between 1% and 5%. So is a minimum, or is a minimum kind of a range? Or like we're looking at either 2.5 people to 12.5 people. That's a pretty wide range. So is just a minimum number another option, or can there be kind of what Iris was suggesting, like if you have higher on the minimum of this level, you can accept lower on that level, and that's kind of what you were. Yeah, and that's just for me. When I see a range, I kind of tend to ignore any particular number.
I think the because of the 250 or more completers, I think we're thinking at 250, it's up around the 5. If you have 1,200 completers, it's closer to the 1% in the employer column at least, in that specific example. And I think you could apply the same thing to the 101 to 250. If it's closer to 101, we're thinking 5%. If it's closer to 250, we're thinking it might be down closer. Oh, the opposite. If it's 101, we're talking the bigger percent. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, is kind of what we were thinking.
Okay.
Point, the larger institutions have a manageability. There's a manageability part. You know, I was thinking of LACO when we did their designated subjects, they had 1,800 candidates in there. And so I was like, oh my gosh, how many are we going to be able to interview?
So I think that brings up a good point that kind of has been talked a little bit about regarding program versus institution. So if you look at that 250 plus and you think about candidates, completers, or employers, and if they have 10 programs, that if you have 10% of the candidates, that's only 25 people in theory. But in reality, it would be inappropriate for an institution, a large institution, to only present 25 candidates if they had 10 programs, because it wouldn't be a robust enough number at each program. And I think you could expect to hear back from within the report that we were unable to get candidates. In the same way at LACO with 1,800 designated subjects, if those were the only people that were talked to, all the minimums would be met, maybe even the maximums, but it still would be inadequate. So there's more to the guidance from consultants because they are talking to institutions program by program by program. So I hope that's helpful.
Our team members actually have a tally sheet by program, by constituency. And what we say is when we look across the team members' tally sheet, we need to see that there's no pattern of omissions. There's no column that's open and there's no row that's open so that we know they've gotten across the program. So they're doing this internally. So I'm talking to an institution, and if they only have in one program 50 completers, they can also use this to think about that program's completers and candidates. So it's helpful for programs and institutions, I think, in that way.
Okay, thank you so much. We are ready to move on to our 2:30. We can revisit this if we need to later, but let's go ahead and move forward with item 16, which is the report of the accreditation team to La Mesa Spring Valley School District. Consultant Karen Sacramento will introduce this item. Joining her at the table is team lead Sandy Beller, and by video, I see you. Institutional representatives Tina Sardina and Brooke Noble. Does anyone need to recuse themselves? Ms. Sacramento, will you begin, please?
All right, good afternoon. This is the report for the La Mesa Spring Valley School District site visit, which was held on March 19th through 21st. And the visit was a very thorough and in-depth review of the La Mesa Spring Valley Teacher Induction Program. Was focused on multiple interviews with stakeholder groups and a review of electronic evidence, both before and during the visit. So I would like to thank the district and program leadership, so Tina Sardina and Brooke Noble's team, for their support and transparency in facilitating the site visit, so before and throughout the visit. I'd also like to note the hard work and diligence of the team members, Kathy Hampton and Deborah Suey, and the tremendous professionalism of Sandy Beller as the team lead. The guidance that she gave around the induction standards and the preconditions was exemplary, and her wise leadership really carried the visit. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sandy to give a more in-depth report of the visit and the program findings.
Thank you very much. I also would like to thank Tina and Brooke and the team that supported our every whim and whimsy as we went through the work at La Mesa Spring Valley. It was a pleasure to work with all of them. They are doing due diligence on so many fronts, and they're to be commended for that. Looking at The findings, you've all seen the report indicating that there were, of the program standards, 4 were met, 2 were not, and Common Standard 1 not met. Common Standards 2 and 5 were fully met, and then Common Standards 3 and 4 met with concerns. And I just want to go through and give a couple of things, information to support that finding. The team also noted that there was a precondition compliance issue at hand with regard to information of induction being used for evaluation employment. And that stems from a very specific piece in their bargaining unit contract around the makeup, the composition of their induction advisory committee, and that it is comprised of both the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources as well as the Assistant Superintendent of Learning Support, along with 3 certificated union members. During their induction advisory meetings, the mentors report in specifically about candidates and so on. It took us a lot of teasing out and working with Brooke and Tina, as well as all of the other stakeholders, to really noodle, is this really a violation, or is this a structure that works for them? And ultimately, as we worked through the process, the team was able to discern that, yes, indeed, there was that precondition compliance issue. I think that's kind of at the crux of everything else that we're going to talk about, that thread, that limited representation on that induction advisory committee really has an impact, as you'll see, and you probably read through the report, on almost every one of the other issues. You can almost take them all back to that one compliance issue, the precondition. With regard to Common Standard 1, as I shared a moment ago, it was not met. Again, coming back to that limited membership of the Induction Advisory Committee, really impeding the team, the program lead's ability to fully access all the resources that need to be in place to complete the job of running the induction program. In addition, having the ability for that bargaining unit language that is very specific about how that advisory committee is comprised, that required negotiation. And so you see Appendix A there that is added to the back of the report, indicating that language was being negotiated. The other piece of that common standard we noted was in the recommendation and selection of mentors. And what we noted was that it, again, is tied to bargaining unit language, where mentors are recommended or nominated to participate to be a mentor by one of their peers. So principals do not have any input into who might be good mentors. Someone who thinks they have something to give back, if they're not nominated by a peer, there's no opportunity for them, nor is there that rigorous selection process of the mentors. All that to say that Brooke and the other mentors on the team are incredible, and the candidates spoke extremely highly of the support, the individualized program that they each receive, and no doubt they are doing a fabulous job. However, by, again, bargaining unit language, it's limited to a term of 3 years, and so there's that consistency of program leadership is impacted. With regard to Common Standard 2, the team found that it was met, and I think, again, La Mesa Spring Valley needs to be commended for their the work that they are doing to provide absolutely phenomenal individualized support for every single teacher that participates in their program. With regard to Common Standard 3, the team found that it was met with concerns. And again, the coursework and everything is tailored to every candidate, but the program's mentor selection process, again, that came up in place here. And as well, there's really no system in place for evaluating those mentors. The mentors participate in developing their own individual learning plans. They do a lot of collaboration among themselves. There really isn't an opportunity for principals and the Induction Advisory Committee evaluation of the work of those mentors. So that was the basis for that recommendation. With regard to Common Standard 4 and continuous improvement, again, we were met with concerns. There is a variety of data gathering processes around getting feedback from candidates, site administrators, and the professional development providers. But again, there's coming back to that limited advisory committee, there's limited opportunity for other stakeholders in the organization to provide feedback on how the program is doing. So that lack of breadth of the program's collection efforts, as it plays into the role of the Induction Advisory Committee, really impedes the program's continuous improvement efforts. With regard to Common Standard 5, it was met, and the only issue that we found with that one was although there is a document in place to determine candidate competence, seems to be a lack of systematic use of determining candidate competence per the standard defined by the Commission. In addition, there were 2 program standards that were not met. And Karen lost so program standard 4 was not met around the qualification, selection, and training of mentors. And again, that selection process is limited. And the training, although they are participating with cluster through county offices and so on, there really is not that full systemic operations of training mentors. And with regard to Program Standard 6, again, not met, providing that formative feedback to mentors on their work and really allowing them to do that. Based on those findings, the team made the following recommended stipulations. That within 1 year, La Mesa Spring Valley Schools must provide evidence that it's actively involving faculty, instructional personnel, and relevant stakeholders in the organization, coordination, and decision-making for all educator prep programs. That they provide evidence that faculty and instructional personnel regularly and systematically collaborate with colleagues in P12 settings in the broader educational community to improve their program. That they provide evidence that the program receives sufficient resources to allow for the effective operation of the educator prep program, and that the resources provided enable each program to effectively operate in terms of coordination, admission, advisement, and so on. Fourth, that they provide evidence that site-based supervisors are carefully selected, trained, and oriented to provide effective, knowledgeable support for candidates. That they provide assurance that the institution employs, assigns, and retains only those qualified to be mentoring their new teachers. That they provide evidence of implementation of a comprehensive continuous improvement process that includes systematic collection, analysis, and use of candidate and program completer data, as well as data reflecting the effectiveness of the entire unit. That they provide quarterly written documentation to the team lead and the commission consultant documenting all actions, and that within 1 year of this action, they host a revisit for us. Again, there's so much good happening with the new teachers. The new teachers affirmed over and over and over the quality support that they were receiving from their mentors. And I think La Mesa, that is the hallmark of their program, and they are truly to be commended for what they've done.
Thank you for your report. At this time, I'd like to provide the institution with an opportunity to respond to the report and share your thoughts on the site visit. I'll remind you that it is not an opportunity to argue the findings of the site visit team.
Thank you. I'm Tina Sardina, the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, and Brooke Noble is here with me as well. And I think both of us would agree 100% that this site visit was beyond beneficial. And, Sandy, Karen, the entire team was just phenomenal, and we've learned so much. We are not in disagreement with anything, and in fact, it was incredibly helpful to be able to present these findings to our Teachers Association. We immediately had the president sign a letter, which I believe was attached in the addendum or appendix, and we've subsequently bargained the revisions of Article 19 that talks about the concerns actually mentioned by Sandy regarding the IAC membership, the selection of the support providers. That all has been corrected, and it is now being ratified. We're hoping for ratification on May 25th, which is Friday, which really will correct all of the issues that Sandy mentioned. We went ahead on April 26th and met with our IAC and shared all the reports similar to what Sandy just did and Karen, and explained the purpose and rationale behind their role to be advisory only and our need to expand the membership to represent all stakeholders. So we feel confident that we are in transition to correct everything to get us through this year. I'm disappointed to share due to funding difficulties, challenges, that we do plan to be inactive and contract with San Diego State University to clear our current year ones and then all subsequent new hires in the future. But again, inactivate with the hope that maybe one day we can reactivate, and we understand when that time comes that we would certainly show evidence that all these things have been corrected.
Thank you for your response. At this time, I'd like to provide the Committee on Accreditation the opportunity to ask clarifying questions and respond to the report of the site visit. Member Riggs?
So that last piece of information that you shared with us related to going inactive on the program, when you think about the list of stipulations and the things you need to do for the people who are presently in the program, right? So no new people will be added. Is that what I'm understanding? And first years are being transferred to, is that what I understood? No? Yes, that's correct. Okay. So, I mean, I think that decision is a, I mean, I'm sorry that that's what it came to. But if that's necessary based upon the resources that you have or don't have access to, then that is a wise decision to recognize that. And so then my question becomes, for the people who are still in the program, how does this list of stipulations get done when the agency knows that we are going inactive? So is there, clearly there's a commitment related to the collective bargaining, which you've already achieved, it sounds like, so that's really wonderful. Will there be that same kind of commitment for the rest of these things for the candidates that you still have to finish through?
So this summer, I am going to work with San Diego State University, where all of our year one candidates will be transitioning, and meet with their director to ensure that each candidate has an early completion option developed so that they do have the support that they need to finish.
Can I ask just some clarifying questions? When we're talking about year one, year twos, when you say year one for next year, are you talking about those that are in year one now transitioning for next year into year two? Or are you talking about, okay, so they will be year twos next year?
Yes.
Out of your program. Okay. So you won't have any candidates next year.
The one issue that I need to work with Karen Sacramento to resolve is we have 3 candidates who still need to complete their EL authorization. They moved here from out of state. They will be completed with induction this year, but if we're going inactive, I'm not sure how to make sure that they're supported through the process and have the opportunity to complete the EL authorization. But they're the only ones, and they will be finished with induction this June.
Yeah, Ms. Carney.
So back to Iris's question, if a program's inactive and there are stipulations looming, then if they eventually withdrew, then there would be no problem. If they were to reactivate, every single thing that was looming would have to be addressed. Is that how it works, or?
Is the challenge, I think, is that stipulations are really supposed to be addressed within a year. And I have the chair of the commission in my head because there was one institution that had stipulations and then went inactive. It took a few months before they figured out they were going inactive, and she kept asking, why do they still have stipulations? And I had to keep repeating, well, they're really inactive. They have no candidates, so they can't. So it's a timing issue. That's a somewhat of a challenge for us. But we want to make sure that, we're doing what we are comfortable doing. So, clearly before they reactivate, they'd have to address everything.
Are there any, not to commit you to anything, but thoughts about reactivating in a year after you've gone through some program improvement, or you're not sure yet?
So I don't mean to minimize the findings, but we think they're very doable, especially with the mentoring of, with our new friends, Sandy and Karen and others here in the county. We think it's very doable to have corrected them. It's truly a prioritization of dollars. And at this time, there's a lot of folks in our district wanting certain dollars, and this was seen as something that we could transfer to San Diego State and be more cost effective. I'm not happy about that necessarily. However, it is our reality. So again, we don't think the findings were difficult to correct within, we think we could, with Brooke here, who's fabulous, we think we could have, fixed those right away. In fact, we're already starting to, because we are clearing people's credential this year. And but the heart and soul of our program truly are our support providers, and they've differentiated the PD and done so many things so well that, again, I don't want to repeat myself. I'm disappointed. However, I'm hopeful that maybe down the road in a couple of years, 3 years, I don't know, to be honest. But for right now, we are going to be inactive for next year for sure.
So my question is if let's say hypothetically in 3 years we got new funds and they get to reactivate and they must address the findings. If we have concerns with the findings right now, should we address that right now? Okay. All right, because I have a little bit of a concern. Member Riggs.
I just need to make sure I'm understanding. So I'm hearing that there would be no program for the next academic year. They would be credentialing people who are finishing this year. You went ahead and did the collective bargaining, but there would be no pursuit of the rest of the stipulations at this time. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, because this was just presented to us in the last 24 hours that they were going inactive, we haven't really had time to think it through in terms of how it would work for us. But I was resolute that you needed to act on the report as is to kind of close that process, and then figure out. It's hard for us to have on the books an institution that has stipulations for more than a year unless you've granted them additional time because they're making progress. In this case, they will have no candidates, and I would assume that most of these findings would require us to confirm with candidates and graduates and others that the changes have been made. So it's posing a little bit of a logistical challenge for me. Yes, Catherine has an idea.
Well, one thing is that inactive programs must still comply with the preconditions. So the precondition issue can be taken care of, whether they're inactive or not. I think what I'm hearing you say is that you sort of have to shelve what their future plans are of going inactive and take action on what is. Is that
I think that's definitely step one.
So we need the 10-day thing added on the preconditions. I didn't see that there. Right. Even though they've submitted a letter, but the letter just says it was an acknowledgement.
Yes. So the problem with the 10 days is because this was built into their contract, we needed their contract process, which is why the letter. They gave us the letter saying their intent was definitely to address the contract issues. And I think what I'm hearing is May 26th, there's ratification. And so maybe a separate letter after May 26th to say it's been done would be really helpful, or whenever that's happening. Some follow up, and then we can tell you that piece is fixed. Karen.
I just want to speak to that. So after that ratification meeting, Tina did share the contract language, just the draft contract language showing that had occurred. So that 10 days, that was the next step within that 10 days. But I think a more formal process of sharing with commission leadership that occurred, and the outcomes of that would be appropriate.
Okay. All right, Member Forbes.
So could then we ask to see a report about the preconditions at our June meeting? Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, she's just that way.
So could we ask then to see a confirmation, a report at the June meeting about the preconditions?
Sure. I think that's a good idea. Mm-hmm.
So my concern with regards to the findings was really around the training of mentors. Sounds like the mentors have been doing a great job. There really isn't a problem right now with the service that they're providing, but I didn't see in the stipulations anything around a systematic plan for providing mentors with initial and ongoing mentor training. And that was a concern for me. Or they don't provide feedback. And I thought that was kind of curious.
So I'd like to speak to that because I think the intent was to include that in stipulation 4, the site-based supervisors being the mentors. So provide evidence that site-based supervisors are carefully selected, trained, and oriented to provide effective, knowledgeable support for candidates. So that's where we put the language, but maybe there's further clarity needed.
It's the ongoing piece. I think that's really important. You can orient it and have that meeting in September and then see you later. We'll talk to you next year. And I think that my understanding is, and best practice is providing some kind of support and training throughout the year, whether it's triennial or, every 3 months or every 4 months or every month. Every program's different. But having just the initial orientation with nothing, no follow-up, I think we need to at least just tweak that just a little bit.
I think that's the intent was ongoing. So
yeah, I understand.
Catching that, I think that. Yes, I agree.
So if we were to make a motion to accept the team's recommendation with your tweak on the mentor training as ongoing, and then the institution doesn't respond to those stipulations with the exception of the precondition, which appears like you'll be able to make that piece, then it just stands as this was the accreditation decision and it doesn't really change then. And then what are the implications for the agency related to reactivation in that case if it goes on beyond a year?
Implications for the agency. I think that before they're reactivated, they would have to address everything. And remember, you can only be inactive for 5 years or you should withdraw. Or will automatically withdraw you. The implementation for the agency would be that we would probably have to footnote or somehow describe that the institution went inactive after the findings and have some indication that there are no candidates in the program. Would stand. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because the issue is, how do you clear this stipulations if there's not a program that's operating, and that's a challenge.
So would our recommendation at this point, if would be if they intend to reactivate within a year, that they would need to provide us with an updated report addressing all the stipulations, including the preconditions, which we'll receive in June. If we do not hear from them for reactivation after a year, do you ask for a yearly statement saying that?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea for us to bring you an update at some point of whether they've reconsidered next spring, they're now going to offer it again the following fall, or whether they've decided to withdraw the program, or they're going to always stay partners with San Diego State. What their current thinking is, I think, would be helpful in 6 or 8 months, something like that. Terry, do you have any ideas or thoughts?
I think that makes a lot of sense. For your purposes today, I think you should kind of ignore the fact that you know they're going to go inactive. Take the action you think is appropriate. Then it leaves it in staff's lap to figure out how to help when they decide to reactivate, if they do. And we're going to have to think that through. But I do think that it's a really good idea to ask for a report, by May 1st of next year. What is their plan for the 1920 year? I think that would be really helpful. And I think in our annual report, we'll also note that they've gone inactive.
I think it would be a good idea to follow up on the preconditions regardless of the actions, so that would be added.
Okay, Member Forbes?
Well, in that case, then I do have some questions about the recommended accreditation decision. Because of the number of standards, including 2 common standards and some program standards not being met, I was curious about the decision for accreditation with stipulations as opposed to with major stipulations, or possibly even probationary.
All right, Ms. Sacramento.
I'll speak to that. So we didn't know which way to go. We went back and forth on whether or not it should be major, and this is where we felt it really was a 50-50, and we had hoped that the guidance of the COA, if needed, would change that. So it was a tough one. It was the number, but it was also the fact that there really was a STEM, and that was that was a huge factor in this, and to discern that if that was addressed, then we wouldn't, probably none of these others would be in place, because in so many ways it was such a high functioning program. So it was really a weighing of the scales for us.
Well, I guess I would just like to say then that I'd feel more comfortable going on the record with either major or possibly probationary stipulations to give that kind of guidance to the institution were they to reactivate or to propose another program, because under just stipulations they're not prevented from proposing another program. And so when I look at the list of what I would like to think of as support under major or probationary stipulations, it would include things like submitting the reports, which is already part of the recommended stipulations, a revisit, which is already part of the recommended stipulations, but also either possibly notifying, if they're going inactive, they are going to be notifying candidates, but, pardon? Oh, that's right. Okay, so they would need to notify then with probationary stipulations or major stipulations, and also be possibly prohibited from proposing new programs until these stipulations have been removed, which I think under the circumstances would be advantageous to both the district in their negotiations and also to the committee in making decisions.
If I can add something else onto that, as Karen said, we went back and forth, and we had, in conversations with the superintendent, we knew that there were some budget issues that were beginning to loom over the program. And I think as we looked at the quality of support that the new teachers are getting, as we looked at them truly embracing the spirit of individualized, specific, job-embedded support for new teachers, and the enormous steps that they had taken to embrace the true spirit of what the induction standards were asking. I know we didn't want to leave them with something that might tip that looming financial decision. So I think we're trying to be strategic in going with the accreditation with stipulations, hoping that, seeing that, as Karen said, there's that one stem of an issue that really, if that gets resolved, a lot of the other pieces will fairly easily fall into place for them. And I think we wanted to leave them in as positive a way as we could, knowing that those financial decisions were looming over them.
I know it's tough with LCFF, the way things have evolved for some of our districts, not really getting the benefit of the new funding formula. All right, so do we have a motion? Cheryl, you want to give it a whirl?
That we amend the recommendation to accreditation with major stipulations, and that we add to the recommended stipulations the one that the institution is prohibited from proposing new programs until the stipulations have been removed.
And I would like a friendly amendment of ongoing and sustained support for mentors.
Does it? Oh. Oh, sorry, I was looking only at the enumerated.
Yep,
I was looking at the enumerated recommendations. Sorry. Okay.
And I would understand that you'd want to report in June about the preconditions?
Yes, that's part of the motion.
Do you want to read it back to us, Cheryl?
It is. The motion is accreditation with major stipulations, with the stipulations that are in the report, as well as a report in June or an update on the issue related to the contract and the preconditions, adding that the institution is prohibited from adding more new programs, and the ongoing issue related to support for mentors. Is that correct?
Sounds good. All right. Do I have a second? Member Co-Chair Frelly. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, and thank you so much to our team lead and state consultant and the district. Best wishes to you as you move forward and try to bring this program back into the fold of your teacher and administrator support.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, we have a district waiting, but I need a 5.
There we go.
Great. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon again. The site visit for Saugus Union School District, which is in Santa Clarita, took place on April 23rd, 24th, and 25th at their district offices. The site visit team had 3 members plus 1 state consultant. As mentioned, we have Melissa Meathall here on Zoom and the induction coordinator, Amy Gaudette. She's the coordinator for the Santa Clarita Valley Elementary Consortium. Saugus USD is the approved program sponsor for that consortium, and we conducted 69 interviews at the site visit with various stakeholder groups beginning on Monday and continuing through Tuesday of the visit. Generally, the visit proceeded in accordance with normal accreditation protocols, with one exception. The Common Standards Addendum and related documents were not received by the team until about a week prior to the visit, so they had to just have the added responsibility of reviewing documents and evidence more so during the site visit as well. Saugus was very responsive to all the team's requests for additional information. I will now hand it over to Melissa, who will present the accreditation report.
Great. Thank you so much. So hello. On behalf of our site visit team, I would like to thank Saugus Union School District, and in particular, Amy Gaudette. As the program coordinator for the consortium, Amy ensured that the review team was supported both with the resources, the materials, everything necessary to conduct the review. So thank you, Amy, for taking care of that. I also like to recognize and thank the site visit team. Thank you to Loy, Dakwa, and Dan Schaefer for the professional and thoughtful way that they carried out their team responsibilities. This included a thorough review of documentation, conducting those interviews, identifying our standards findings, and of course those standard findings which led to our unanimous recommendation. Loy and Dan were truly outstanding team members, so I really appreciated them. And also, of course, want to thank William for his support and for his patience and support to progress through all the stages of the review. And you know that that starts long before the site visit, so thank you for that. I would like to start with some contextual or some background information, which I hope will make our findings and our suggested recommendations, help those make sense a bit. So a first piece of contextual information is regarding the consortium itself. So the consortium currently supports 4 districts, and all of those are elementary districts, so K-6 or K-8. Secondly, the program coordinator, Amy, is relatively new to her role. She started last year during the 16-17 school year. Another contextual note is regarding the guidance, the current guidance that we receive about the expectations for the completer interviews. And I wanted to bring this up and explain why that number of completers it may at first look, as you were reading the report, it may look relatively, or it may look low. Based on the recent changes in the accreditation system, it has been indicated that when completer survey is robust, meaning a high response rate, and positive, that the team may choose to omit completers from the pool of interviews when we arrange the visit. So in preparation for this visit, before our visit, we were able to review the statewide completer data, and the data was robust. We could have decided to omit completers. However, having kind of a little bit of a qualitative piece to myself, I asked that we have the opportunity to hear from just a few completers. And what I was hoping was that those interviews would be valuable, and they were, in providing us that perspective to more fully understand the candidate experience. So I just want to put that up front. Low numbers, but we could have omitted them, and they were beneficial and they were valuable. Next, I'd like to go on to some highlights from the visit. The strengths, one of the things that the team really took note of was the individualized learning plan. The team noted the consistent implementation of this individualized learning plan, and it served as a guide for that support for those induction candidates. The document review provided evidence of how it was used to guide their inquiry. They also used that their learning plan to decide which resources they were going to use, and interviews with the candidates and mentors further supported their evidence or their understanding of how that was their growth-focused relationship. And I do think that that consistency and the strength of all those ILPs that we saw, that was noteworthy. Another highlight are the observations and interviews, of course, and documents provided and confirmed that those interviews are taking place with great frequency. Candidates are observed multiple times by their mentors. In addition to those observations by their mentors, they're also able to visit or observe other teachers. And the candidates placed a high value on these. They appreciated that part of their induction experience, and those visiting other teachers, if you will, those other observations of other teachers, that took place across all of the participating districts. And then lastly, as a highlight and strength, was what we heard about communication. And we heard strong and consistently across all of those stakeholders, including credential staff, FISC folks, site administrators, mentors, and candidates. They knew what was expected. They knew who to communicate with. Amy has been able to present at the beginning of the year for all of the site administrator, perhaps at a site administrator meeting in each one of the districts, for example. So those are all to be commended. So we were very pleased to hear all of those and to be able to share those. I'm going to go into the recommendations next, and I know that you've all read the report, and we certainly did do a close examination, and we certainly did get our interviews in. And after that, we have our unanimous recommendation for accreditation stipulations. And this is based on the findings that Common Standard 1 and 2 were met with concerns, and the program standards 5 and 6 were also met with concerns. So at this point, I just want to go into a little discussion to help you, hopefully help you better understand those. For Common Standard 1, the research-based program has been on the old model, and I know from some of the report outs this year you've been hearing about the green cohort, and the so what is currently going to address this better is that they're really looking for what is it that we're going to articulate and what are we going to move forward based on. So what we learned is that they are looking at a model. Advisory or the governance has yet maybe to make a final decision on that, but they are currently working on that research model. So that was one part. That was inconsistent. We felt that was inconsistent. That was part of Standard 1. The second part of Standard 1, and now this item is not an inconsistent, it was a not evidence. And at the time of the visit, we could not find evidence that the unit addressed recruitment efforts for the hiring or retaining of faculty, teaching staff who represent diversity. So that was a not evidence on that. The lack of purposeful recruiting for diversity is also where the team found, and that is why we had Common Standard 2 as met with concerns. So you can see that thread there for Standard 1 and for Standard 2. In the program standards, the findings for 5 and 6, those were connected to the advisory team's progress and their approval of their handbook. So the program has a handbook, it has policies in place, and they were revising and working on getting through their approval process to get all of those policies approved and published. And so in 5 and 6, it has many policies and practices that had been approved, but there were 2 in particular, 1 and 5, 1 and 6, that were just not yet approved. And I think that may have happened after we left. And we think that that will be evidence in the future. So I hope that helps make clear the connection to the language in our stipulations. And I know you have those. How would you like me to do that?
I think we don't need you to read them. That's okay, Melissa. Thank you, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's my presentation. It was certainly my pleasure to serve on the visit, and I welcome any questions.
Great. Thank you for your report and your service. At this time, I'd like to give the institution an opportunity to respond to the report and the site visit findings. It is not an opportunity to argue the findings. So thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I wanted to first just take a moment to thank the team. It really felt like Melissa and William and Dan and Loy were working to find what was really accurate about what was going on in our program. It felt like an authentic effort to understand our program, and it felt like support, which I think is probably what we're trying to do here. So I want to thank you in particular, William and Melissa, for providing that support, because as I feel like in the stipulations, there are things that were already in the works. That gives us validation that we're on the right track, and it also gives us some accountability to make sure that we are meeting the standards as the commission has approved them and proposed them. So thank you for the opportunity. I will say that we did have the steering committee and they did approve the handbook. I did not want to have a handbook that was presented to folks who and had not been gone by the steering committee yet. So we were waiting for that piece, and so that's going to help us address some of our findings as well. So again, thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that all of you have.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to provide the Committee on Accreditation the opportunity to ask clarifying questions and respond to the report. I'm practicing my wait time. Did you have something you wanted to add? Okay. All right. Member Forbes, thank you.
Well, congratulations on the progress that you're making and the spirit with which the recommendations were received and getting to work on them. I was curious because a couple of the standards had to do with the diversity in terms of recruiting both mentors and candidates or teachers. And so I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what you plan to do in that regard.
Sure. A couple of the suggestions that have been made is presenting steering committee with data that reveal the demographics of the students we serve and the teacher, and as well as the participating teachers and mentors, so that we can kind of get that information out to our unit. Our unit stance at this point is that we don't actively recruit for teachers because we have so many applicants. So really kind of bringing that information forward and making light of that, as well as in the memorandums of understanding with each district, having that expectation kind of embedded in that document that, it's one thing to put on the posting that we are equal opportunity employers. It's another thing to actively seek out a diverse pool. So really presenting that information to the stakeholders so that they can see and make decisions based on real data.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, suggestions? No? All right, this is an action item. Do I have a motion?
I'm sorry, I had one thing that I just needed to clarify in the report. We said we would get updates in the form of periodic reports, and the team, I didn't put it in the report, but the team was recommending that quarterly would be sufficient for that. So I just wanted to put that in front of the COA.
All right, thank you for that clarification. And a motion was started by Member Alvarado.
I move that we accept the staff recommendation of accreditation with stipulations as provided to us in the report.
With quarterly reports added. Yes, and a second by Member Borges. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And we look forward to seeing you we'll hear from you, I guess, from your quarterly report. Thank you so much.
Just want to say thank you for that support as well, because being new to the whole process, it is imperative that we have that support to make the corrections that need to happen. So thanks for William.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Melissa.
Okay, so that brings us, I'm sensing a lull in the energy here. But rest assured, we're almost at the end of our agenda for today. We are on item 19, which is the discussion of potential criteria and process for identifying exemplary programs. Director Terry Clark will present this information item. Ms. Clark, will you begin, please?
Yes. So this is another agenda item that we discussed with all the accreditation staff so that we could make sure we were kind of on the same page and could bring you forward some information. If you'll recall, it has been an interest of the commission that there's a way to identify exemplary programs. And I think the vision for that is a number of our institutions don't necessarily have people right nearby to collaborate with. I often think of the private and independent colleges and universities. In March, I attended the CSU Deans meeting where the deans come together for more than a day to talk through a lot of issues. So they have kind of a professional learning community there to deal with that. In the private and independent world, that doesn't happen really very often. So this idea of identifying exemplary programs. But we're also very cognizant of the fact that there is an accreditation framework, there's an accreditation system. So we were trying to think about how can we do this maybe outside the accreditation system in some ways. So what we put in here was this idea of, well, what if we said that accreditation was the entry point? You had to go over the doorway, and you can only come into this and ask for this if, and what we've proposed in here, and it's for your conversation, is the idea that you have to have met all the program standards for the program you're asking for. You have to have met all the common standards so your institution is effective and working well, and you have to have earned full accreditation. So that kind of limits the number of entities that are eligible. We also have 40 different types of credential programs, and it does not make sense to us to start with 40 types in this system at once. So we were kind of thinking maybe teachers and leaders, preliminary administrative services and the clear administrative services, preliminary teaching programs and the clear teaching, that could be a smaller group of programs to do a pilot with. Then on the bottom of page 2 and into page 3, then we start talking about, well, what would a program need to do? And so we thought, well, maybe there could be a group of exemplary program staff that would review these nominated forms. And so in future years, whoever was exemplary this year could be on the panel for selecting exemplary in the future. Of course, that does mean we have a problem the first year. How do you get a panel the first time? So what kind of thought about was maybe some people who are very knowledgeable about the standards. The preliminary admin standards are fairly new, as are the clear induction admin standards. Gay knows who was on those writing panels, and we also know which programs we know are doing a really good job. So we could maybe come up with a 3 to 5 member panel for those out of that. And with the teacher induction and the preliminary, we know who was on the standards panel again, and we have some examples of programs that are doing really good jobs. So we thought maybe we could find the first panel in that way. Then we did talk about maybe if there were applicants, and the application process that we have brainstormed to date is no more than a 5-page paper identifying the exemplariness of this program and a supporting statement or endorsement from an employer or completer. The unit head would have to verify because we wanted some things to be in place. If they are exemplary, we would like them to agree that you'll provide technical guidance to other institutions that contact you. And we were thinking we would develop a web page for exemplary programs. So if it's a preliminary multiple single and they're really grappling with the 10 hours of the mentor teaching, the training, somebody submitted for exemplary and they explained their mentor training plan, that institution could then contact the identified exemplary program to say, we want to talk to you about this. We want to brainstorm. This makes some of us fairly uncomfortable because we think we have a solid accreditation system now, and we think we don't want to goof it up with any of this. But we do know that there's an interest on the Commission's part of identifying exemplary programs to allow for sharing of ideas. So this is a brainstorm that we came up with in the last month or so. We have a number of questions starting on page 5. We have the expectations that we would ask the programs that are deemed to be exemplary is up a little higher on page 5, that they would have to engage in outreach. They would prepare a presentation for the commission or the committee where they would maybe share about what they're doing, and that they would serve on the panel for the next year. So that's kind of what we've brainstormed. We have a number of questions. We probably should have numbered the questions so we could kind of maybe go through them in order. In some ways, the first question, because the Commission has said they are interested in this, so if we could look at the first question of how could the COA think about an exemplary process if the Commission has directed us to figure out one? It's really not as much do you want one or not, because the Commission has kind of said we're interested in this. So if you could help us brainstorm is kind of what we're thinking here. I don't know if you have any questions about the general, what's in here, but we're thrilled to have your conversation on the topic. I'll take notes.
Member Riggs and then Member Alvarado.
Related to the accreditation status, is it, let's say you have a program that had been put on probation and then got the probation, that got full accreditation after that point, so then are they eligible at that point? Is that, it's whenever you've got full accreditation that you're eligible, even if you came from a very difficult review?
I think what we were looking at is it is the first year, it's the year of your site visit, and it's at your site visit time. I don't think we were thinking about you were at probationary status and you clean things up. If, you were that way and the next time you hold a site visit, you qualify, then you could go for it. It was just a 1 year thing because 3 years after the site visit, we can't really say if we know if they're exemplary still, but we would have new institutions every year. And so we would start to get this body of expertise.
Staff raised that same question. It's at the bottom of page 5, so it sounds like you're saying no. Yeah.
It's really up to your conversation. This is just kind of what we've thrown out as possibilities.
I'm thinking, based on this, that having, I got busy thinking. Having that site visit report is all accreditation with no stipulation. So they've already been giving the thumbs up by us. Then they have the opportunity to apply for the status themselves if they want to. They may not choose to pursue that, but put the onus on them. Maybe send them an email. Because you've done this, you have the opportunity to apply. I have some other thoughts too, but.
So I have been thinking a lot about this, and I'm glad that you're sharing in terms of what the rationale is, but I just want to ask the question, is this the best way to achieve what it is that you're trying to achieve? That is, if you're looking at creating a support system for institutions to be able to access those that are doing well, and we talked about a collective or, cohorts that exist out there for districts. Could we view this the same way without getting into whether programs are exemplary or not? That is, is this the best vehicle for achieving your goal? And I'm not so sure it is. Secondly, to me, identifying, if assuming that this is the best vehicle, making that assumption, then, what are the criteria? Because I'm concerned that it doesn't create the haves and the have-nots, and it becomes an inequitable issue of equity, where programs that have a lot of resources can have a lot of innovative things built into them. Programs that don't have resources that don't. And so that's a problem. And then the third thing I have is I also have a problem with, and one of my pet peeves is innovations for innovation's sake. We're different because we can afford to be different, but it doesn't necessarily yield any better outcomes. And finally, I would say that if we do decide this is the best, the best vehicle to achieve our goal, then I would say let's focus on criteria that has a meaningful outcome for the students we serve, not for the recognition it brings the institution. Is it producing better RECA scores? Is it producing higher pass rates with TPA? Are the students staying longer in the field as teachers? I'm talking about meaningful things, not, hey, look at us, we have a glossy brochure kind of thing. But what are those variables that really make a difference in people's lives? If we decide this is the best vehicle. I'm not saying it is. Thank you.
Well said. Member Riggs?
I appreciate those comments. And, when we've talked about this in the past, there's been a lot of resistance and concerns. And I'm trying to really be open-minded and realize that this is something the commission wants. When I read through the document, I liked the idea of helping, but then the term exemplary, and I actually looked up the term exemplary, and if we're saying an exemplary program, serving as a desirable model representing the best of its kind is the definition of exemplary in this way. So if we put that title on a program, I think to the public and to potential candidates, that means the entire program. And yet what I'm reading here, what the part I love about what I'm reading is the helpful nature of saying, oh, here is a program that has an awesome, effective training for their site-based supervisors. You could go forward and say that. The program has to have come from an institution that fully met the accreditation standard, all the standards, common and program. So it's overall good, right? But we feel uncomfortable with saying that any such program would just get the designation exemplary because they went through that accreditation process if we're trying to keep it separate. So then it becomes, well, it's not necessarily that the whole program is exemplary. It's exemplary in this one aspect. And so I'm comfortable with that component of it, but I'm not comfortable with the term exemplary program because I think that communicates something very different.
Member Borges. Member Politaio. Started with a B.
Well, my question also is how long would these just 1 year? Okay.
Our thinking is 1 year, although I don't think we'd take them off the web page. So if you were exemplary a year ago for training your mentors, that could still be there, but you would not be determined to be exemplary. You would not be called exemplary the next year.
So then that requisite help that they provide is only required for that one whole year. Are there any other perks to this? It's like a ribbon or something.
They get to serve on the committee to select exemplaries the next year. There aren't any other perks, really.
Mm-hmm.
They do. Yeah. So one of the reasons I was willing to bring this forward again, because we've had it here in front of you a couple times, was the induction programs. One of our early visits this year, I'm pretty sure it was San Bernardino City. Was. I mean, the team, the consultant, everyone said, this is a place that has got it. They understand these new induction standards, and they are doing an amazing job. That was before our December induction conference, when I had a lot of people coming up to talk to me one-on-one after I said, you may not have consistent professional development that you require everyone to go to, because so many of our programs weren't getting it. And there's been at least 3 more of the site visits this year where those 4 or 5 induction programs, they got it. So it would be so nice to be able to identify them, to say they are a resource to other induction programs. And that's the area where I could really see it the most clear this year, that would be so beneficial.
So, I mean, that makes sense to me. And in fact, in the CSU, what we have is we have our completer survey, 1 year out survey. Based on those surveys, centrally we look at those campuses that are achieving the best results. Let's say I'm working with English learners, teaching teachers to work with students with disabilities, and then those folks are approached, and then there's a webinar so that we all get to learn from their best practices. Maybe that's the kind of system. Again, going back to, is this the best vehicle for achieving what we need? If you as the commission know where the programs are that are outstanding already, you know this. We just heard one earlier today with Santa Ana. Why couldn't they bubble up, and then we create a series of webinars or seminars where anyone who has issues with those particular things they're presenting on, they can join in and learn on their own. And we're still getting to what we need, which is creating access to quality programs so people can replicate those practices without necessarily maybe getting into this more controversial kind of issue.
Oh. So, no, it's okay. So I'm thinking two things. One, it would be nice to connect that status to data, right? To improve scores, retention rates, whatnot. But it's not necessary. I'm also thinking that there are so many programs that have components or standards that they meet in an exemplary way. It's not necessarily an overarching, like let's say somebody is doing a great job with recruitment of mentors and training and professional development and pairing and diversity for mentors, and the other components or standards may be met well, but there's an exemplary and then we could have webinars based on a program that has met program standard 5 really well, or a program standard that sounds very busy. But it also, I know that as a writer, that I would love to be able to go and say, okay, we're struggling with program standard 3. How could we do a better job? What are my resources, rather than bugging the CTC staff all the time? Right, Member Riggs.
So I don't know how the commission would respond to taking off the term exemplary, but still doing this, because I'm actually really excited about what I've heard and read, that if somebody goes through accreditation and they have full accreditation in their site visit year, I love that. I've always had trouble with the other piece, so I'm glad that it sounds like maybe there's some agreement on that piece. And then those institutions that have been able to accomplish that know that this is an opportunity to apply for some kind of recognition. And when I think about it, I like the term accreditation mentor. Your program can become an accreditation mentor. That, to me, describes more of what I see proposed here, which is very in line with what you just said, Anna, that it is not, the way it's being laid out is not overall exemplary program, but aspects of the program that are exemplary. And then if the website did have it by standard for the program, it really is an easier way for other programs to seek out help. I remember looking for help when I first became associate dean and was in charge of accreditation, and it was really by word of mouth and looking at the website for the CTC. So trying to find where could I go for help to understand what I was, to get oriented as an associate dean into these responsibilities. And that would be really great to be able to go and say, here it is. It's by standard for this program, or even maybe in some cases it would be related to common standards too. So yeah, so that, somebody could say, oh, our assessment system is outstanding. We're willing to help other institutions with their assessment system, which is always such a big challenge for many of our agencies.
And it could be as simple as posting their narrative, and we could ask the institution, can we post your narrative for a response to that standard? Or would they like to provide a walkthrough or a screencast or a webinar, host a webinar, depending on if there's an overwhelming response. I know that we frequently have institutions that diversity piece of recruitment for diversity seems to come up a lot. And it can be challenging. And I would love to, I know that would be a common one. So could we have a webinar on that one? Because have 7 dots on that one, or however you're documenting that. The need for that kind of support. Because we know that the institutions want to do it. Everybody comes to us saying thank you, and that they want to do the best they can. But when you get in your little microcosm, it's hard to, or in other things besides teacher induction, we don't have clusters. I've asked Gay, are we going to do administrative services credential clusters? So we could talk about best practice. Right now we're trying to address Cal APA, and who do you go to? Except for Gay. She's always on the computer answering our questions. Thank you, Gay. Got some ideas, Ms. Clark?
So it sounds like if we're not calling it an exemplary program, that would be a good thing to start with. How about an exemplary aspect to your program? Because the word's in there still. So the commission knows we're still going towards the word they've told us to go towards. So an exemplary aspect of a program. Catherine.
You could also switch the words. So you could put program first. Programs exhibiting exemplary practices, although it might lose the suggestion of accreditation mentor.
But in some ways, I'm not sure it's an accreditation mentor. It's more of a program mentor in some of the situations. So program exemplars.
Well, and I like that too because it kind of points beyond accreditation and compliance, and I think really that's what this is all about. It's about improving practice and improving outcomes for kids, you know. And so, because otherwise the exemplary programs, it really started to sound to me like exemplary institutions. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been down that road with a certain national organization that we won't name, that, you know, it became an exercise in rating syllabi or something.
Right.
So the more we can differentiate the purpose behind this, you know, in the labels that are chosen.
I'm thinking that with this program exemplars, that maybe we prepare an agenda item for your June meeting that fleshes this out with this focus. And it sounds like you're saying you would be comfortable if staff worked on this. Part of it is we don't want to ask team members because the team members are been trained and they're charged to say, this is the standard. Is this program meeting this standard? But I do think consultants on site visits hear comments from team members about programs. And if the institution has met this basic, I think this could work.
Well, could there be a nomination process so that the staff can nominate, but programs could self-nominate or something like that, you know?
Member Briggs.
I wonder just in the way the title would be program exemplar : training, you know, either if you don't want to tie it to accreditation, you don't have to put it to the standard, but it would be training of mentors, or it would be, you know, subject matter pedagogy, or whatever it would be. So it's clear that it's not overall judgment.
In preparation for next time, one of the questions that surfaced that maybe to think about or give us guidance now is that, you know, expiration dates. So one of the issues that came up in conversation is that we have programs that are very stable and they're doing something in an extraordinary way and they're going to keep on doing it in an extraordinary way. And then we've all had examples where institutions or programs have had a change in leadership, they've had a change in resources. And so thinking about the presence of how long, and because I know that's part of the struggle of there's not a system for continuing to monitor that they're doing an extraordinary job. And so like it might not be for today, it might be something like to put in your back burner as we bring it forward, but I think that that is an important issue in any kind of designation of that staff would need to figure out. And so if not now, we'll ask you again. So
I think this is helpful. I think I have some good ideas for an item we can prepare for you in June to bring it back to think about. Are you interested, if we can come up with this plan, in allowing the institutions in the green cohort who have qualified to pilot this first year? Because then in the agenda item, we would also, I think, go through, we wouldn't be able to do the institutions that are coming to you at the June meeting, but we have all the other institutions for the year, and we would know which institutions could be eligible. So we'll work on that.
Well, you know, I mean, like I observe and I don't want to, but anyway, I believe the purpose of this was to highlight, right, and to be able to show, not necessarily to create a competition, but to say, look, this is happening here, let's highlight this, like blue ribbon schools, for example. One of my concerns is, let's say, for example, a CSU where you may have students who work full-time, and then they come in and they take their classes at night, they're exhausted, right? They may not have the same achievement that students do, or the program may not have the same level of success in certain criteria that students who are at Stanford Teacher Education Program, where they're full-time, who have taken a GRE to get in there, who are also doing master's work and have, right, you know, and so it will be the haves and the have-nots, and it'll just always seem to create that divide that we have also in our schools, the achievement gap, the, right, you know, the inequalities, and that it may take that direction. So I do believe that doing something that focuses on, you know, this program is doing this really well, and let's see how they can share it like we did today, right? You know, you brought up a couple of times, well, we need to share this, what San Diego County Office of Education did. We need to share this as a way of coming in and presenting to us, or the school that's using Canvas, right? I think it was Santa Clara. And those are best practices, so it could be a way to get that out there and give people hope as opposed to discouraging them, which the word exemplary or doing it this way might do, right? Something we can never achieve.
All right. Well done, team. We will now recess this meeting until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and have a good evening.